You're listening to the Core Factors audio library, spoken versions of Core Factors articles and research. This piece is titled The New Leadership Currency: Emotional Energy in the Age of Burnout. The following narration preserves the original content and context of the written article.
The New Leadership Currency: Emotional Energy in the Age of Burnout. Leadership has always been demanding, but recent years have introduced a new kind of exhaustion that goes beyond workload or time. Many leaders are not running out of time or skill, they are running out of emotional energy. The relentless pace of change, constant connectivity, and pressure to manage both business results and people's well-being have quietly depleted a critical leadership resource. Emotional energy is the inner capacity to stay focused, empathetic, and balanced under demand. It has become the real currency of leadership effectiveness. When emotional energy runs low, even experienced leaders lose access to the qualities that make them effective. Perspective narrows, patience shortens, trust erodes. Teams begin to mirror that depletion, often mistaking it for disengagement or lack of direction. Traditional leadership development continues to emphasize time management, productivity, and performance metrics, rather than the emotional patterns that drive them. Burnout has become a systemic issue, not a personal flaw. Organizations that fail to manage leaders' emotional energy risk losing both talent and momentum. Why burnout has become a leadership issue? Burnout has become a defining feature of leadership across industries. It shows up as mental fatigue, emotional numbness, and an inability to recharge, even after rest. Workforce research consistently shows that the most common reason leaders consider leaving their roles is not workload alone, but sustained emotional strain. In many cases, the leaders responsible for motivating others are operating from a deficit of motivation themselves. This depletion has clear business consequences. When emotional energy declines, communication becomes transactional. Creativity shrinks, decision-making grows reactive. Leaders who once inspired confidence may rely more heavily on control than collaboration. The ripple effect is visible. Teams disengage, innovation slows, turnover increases. Burnout is not only a human challenge, it is a performance challenge. One of the most overlooked truths about burnout is that it reflects an imbalance between emotional output and renewal. Every day, leaders invest energy through empathy, conflict management, and problem solving. When that investment is not replenished, the system collapses. Leaders are not failing because they care too little. They are depleted because they care too much. The solution lies in learning how to recognize, regulate, and renew emotional energy. This is the foundation of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence as a framework for renewal. Emotional intelligence, or EQ, is often described as a soft skill. In practice, its impact on leadership performance is concrete and measurable. EQ represents the behaviors that govern how people manage themselves and relate to others. Core Factors EQ Accelerator defines emotional intelligence across 4 measurable quadrants that together form the foundation of emotional energy management. The 4 quadrants of emotional intelligence. Self-awareness. This quadrant reflects the ability to recognize one's own emotional patterns, strengths, and limitations. Behaviors such as mindfulness, authenticity, and accurate self-assessment help leaders detect early signs of depletion before those feelings shape interactions. Other awareness. This quadrant reflects the ability to perceive the emotions and perspectives of others. Empathy and situational awareness help leaders understand the emotional climate of their teams and respond with sensitivity rather than reactivity. Self-regulation. Self-regulation reflects the ability to manage emotional reactions under stress. Competencies such as adaptability, impulse control, and optimism enable leaders to remain composed amid volatility and competing priorities. Other engagement. This quadrant reflects the ability to use emotional information to build trust, manage conflict, and strengthen collaboration. Skills such as active empathy, conflict management, and influence translate emotional awareness into meaningful action. The EQ Accelerator measures both the effectiveness of these behaviors and the degree to which individuals consider them important. The relationship between importance and effectiveness reveals what core factors calls the EQ gap. This gap identifies areas where emotional energy is being spent inefficiently. For example, a leader who places high importance on empathy but feels less effective demonstrating it may overextend emotionally without seeing results. By identifying and addressing these gaps, leaders can redirect energy toward behaviors that renew rather than deplete. From awareness to action, applying the what, so what, now what model. Awareness leads to change only when it results in action. The what, so what, now. What model provides a structured reflection process that helps leaders translate insight into growth. What? Identify specific findings from the EQ assessment. A leader might recognize that they rate themselves highly on adaptability, but lower on resilience, indicating they adjust well to change but struggle to recover from prolonged stress. So what? Explore why this matters. How does that imbalance affect decision-making, communication, or trust? Low resilience often manifests as emotional fatigue that spreads to others, reducing morale and confidence. Now what? Turn insight into practice. Leaders may set goals such as pausing before responding under pressure, journaling emotional triggers, or scheduling intentional recovery periods. Over time, these micro-actions strengthen emotional regulation and rebuild capacity. For coaches and practitioners, this model provides a practical framework for guiding development conversations. Each session can focus on one insight from EQ data and link it to real-world outcomes. Emotional energy becomes a discipline rather than a temporary correction. Building energy-aware cultures. While emotional intelligence begins at the individual level, its greatest impact is cultural. Organizations that treat emotional energy as a strategic resource build resilience that endures disruption. Human capital research shows that integrating well-being into leadership capability has become a top business priority. Rather than offering isolated stress management programs, leading organizations embed emotional awareness into leadership frameworks, performance reviews, and succession planning. EQ data allows organizations to see broader emotional patterns shaping culture. For example, if managers consistently report high importance but low effectiveness in resilience or trust building, it signals systemic emotional overload. These insights allow development teams to design targeted interventions that address specific behaviors rather than relying on generic engagement strategies. Over time, this creates what Core Factors calls an energy-aware culture. In such cultures, emotional awareness, communication, and trust are understood as key performance variables. Using EQ data to drive organizational insight. With tools like the EQ Accelerator, organizations can track leadership growth across all 4 quadrants, identify where emotional energy is being depleted or misdirected, connect emotional intelligence data to outcomes such as retention, collaboration, and innovation. This data-driven approach helps HR and learning leaders align well-being and performance rather than treating them as separate priorities. How practitioners can support sustainable leadership. For talent development professionals, emotional energy reframes leadership development. Instead of focusing solely on knowledge or skills, practitioners focus on balance. They help leaders see where emotional effort is overinvested and how renewal can be built in. 3 practical applications stand out. Coach through the quadrants. Use self-awareness, self-regulation, other awareness, and other engagement to structure conversations about energy use and renewal. Integrate micro-learning. Short learning modules on mindfulness, adaptability, or empathy help leaders practice regulation in the flow of work. Use data for direction, not diagnosis. The EQ gap helps leaders own development by focusing on balance and improvement rather than judgment. When emotional energy becomes part of leadership language, culture shifts. Burnout prevention becomes performance sustainability. Well-being and effectiveness are understood as inseparable. The future of sustainable leadership. Leadership effectiveness will increasingly be measured by endurance. The ability to sustain clarity, empathy, and purpose under continuous pressure will define success. The leaders who thrive will not necessarily be those who work hardest, but those who manage emotional resources with intelligence and intention. Emotional intelligence provides the framework for this shift. It helps leaders understand how emotions drive decisions, how decisions shape culture, and how awareness leads to better outcomes. Through tools like the EQ Accelerator, practitioners and organizations can measure, monitor, and develop the emotional behaviors that renew energy rather than drain it.
This concludes the audio version of this Core Factors article. You can read the full written version and explore related research at corefactors.com.